From Bitcoin, blockchain or distributed ledger technology to cryptocurrencies, tokens and initial coin offerings, it seems everyone involved has something to say, but can you really trust their advice? One man's had enough of weasel words and charlatans and is ready to give you impartial, independent analysis. With digestible blockchain bites, ICO analysis and need-to-know news on cryptocurrencies, author, speaker, transparency and clarity advocate and award-winning software innovator Barry James brings you Radio ICO.
And it's Barry James yet again for ICO Radio Blockchain Bites programme, exploring the territory here, and this time with Charlie Kerrigan from CMS, who is a banking partner at CMS. Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your background, would you please, and how did you get here in the blockchain world?
Well, I work for financial institutions and technology companies, and all financial institutions these days will tell you that they are technology companies. So it's clear that there's always been technology in banks and those large institutions. Essentially what they're involved in is the transmission of information. So payment services and intermediation of capital are information problems, and they're solved by technology. So it's a short step from that into the world of fintech, and an even shorter step from fintech into blockchain and ICOs. So this is about capital raising through new routes, and it's about using blockchain technology to provide efficient and speedier payment service functions.
So what kind of clients are doing this stuff and getting you involved in blockchain or ICO projects?
We have a relationship with most of the banks in the market today, and each of them have relationships with a lot of the smaller fintech businesses. So it's a competitive market, but it's also a symbiotic market. From the bank's perspective, they can see that they've got the value in their part of the chain through customer relationships, but they can also see that as things change quickly, it may not be possible for them to innovate organically. So they want to have relationships with the startups, the maturing fintech companies, and obviously from those companies' perspectives, the banks can be large customers. There's an interesting question of the intersection where symbiosis becomes competition. Both sides of the fence, people are acutely aware of that. And we also have a lot of interest from technology companies. So as we can see from their perspective, the customer experience includes payments experience, developments in technology, hardware and software relate to payments and relate to money. And we can also see that they have an interest in blockchain because there are record keeping and transfer of value aspects to that are relevant to technology companies. So we've had, in the world of technology, media and telecommunications, we've had convergence as a theme for many years. This is another area that we're seeing convergence.
So when we were chatting earlier, you mentioned that to be involved in banking these days is to be involved in blockchain. That was a really interesting comment. Paint the picture a bit for us, would you? How do you see that now, and where do you see it going in the future?
It's a great question. So it could go in a number of directions. I think one of the key drivers for banks is that historically settlement times have always been a significant open question for them. From a customer perspective, the shorter settlement times can get the better, but there's a significant amount of technology and work involved in reducing those. There's also relationships with regulators and central banks, in the case of the UK, the Bank of England. So You have a starting point in banking where domestic and international payments don't have real-time settlements historically. One of the things that blockchain can do is reduce settlement times. It can improve security. It can improve efficiency. So a lot of the technology and innovation that's arising from this is looking at those particular aspects, which is a good thing from the consumer's perspective, because all of those things go directly to the consumer experience. One of the things that technology developments have generally done is provide a significant deflationary pressure on costs and timetable, and this blockchain technology will be applied in ways throughout the financial services industry that support that.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So in terms of your where things are going with you and the firm here, do you get involved? You clearly get involved in quite innovative things. Do you get involved in things like ICOs as well?
We do. ICOs are a natural way of raising funds, and my career has been involved in raising funds for a lot of emerging companies, a lot of innovative businesses. So we're clear that there's a window we're in currently where ICOs are broadly unregulated. The questions around various jurisdictions and how they will approach the question of policy around ICOs. But from the perspective of the businesses that are raising funding, ICOs are relatively quick and cheap, and if they are developed in a way which is consistent with the principles of financial regulation, then they shouldn't pose a threat to consumer protection. We're likely to see a number of moves across the various international jurisdictions, and we've seen different responses already. So in Asia, there has been more of a drive to close down that market and look, we assume, to bring regulation in. In the UK, the FCA is not regulating currently, but has a watching brief on it. There's a significant responsibility on the companies raising funds to behave in a way which takes account of kind of market norms, even when they're not directly applied by the FCA. And most people that we're working with are people who have some background in finance. So they've seen the kind of rules that would apply on IPOs, international public offerings of shares, or bond issues, and generally take account of those rules, even if they're not directly applicable, to ensure that consumer protection is at the forefront of a lot of these fundraising transactions, because it won't be to anyone's benefit if that isn't in the front of people's minds when they're doing the transactions. Yeah,
and transparency is really important, of course, isn't it? And people who listen to this show, at least those that do so regularly, know it's one of the things that I'm most interested and passionate about, partly because its impact on crowdfunding in getting rid of problems and fraud and bad actors has been very, very powerful. Do you think there's a role for that in ICOs as well?
Yeah, there is, absolutely. And a lot of the FCA rules come from a principles-based perspective, and one of those principles is around transparency. So in particular, to ensure that there isn't information which is held within the business that isn't made available to people who might be investing in the business. That's a kind of keystone of the regulation. And as you say, the importance of that is that it will avoid any inadvertent misrepresentations from people who are looking to describe their business and looking to describe the use of the proceeds that they may be raising.
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting to me for obvious reasons. But within the sort of crowdfunding world, and to some extent we've seen this carry over, not as much as I would like. There's an expectation that people will answer questions. in a public forum and share information in a way that is relatively new, and that seems to me quite a powerful thing.
Yeah, I think so. And one of the successes of crowdfunding in the UK market has generally been that there has been the accessibility and transparency. There is a level of professionalism in the investors that is good to see, and that will only be improved by having better access to the people who are running the platforms and using the proceeds that are raised.
Great. So, just final question, really. What comes next?
I think we will see more of the technology companies looking for a greater share of the consumer wallet. So what we're looking at here is in some ways a conversation that's taking place in the public forum about brand. And we can see that there is a lot of trust in bank brands. Not all of them have had success with their technology in terms of getting it improved and integrated through the rise of new products. But if you look at the brand relationship that consumers have with technology companies, that's a very powerful thing. And I think the technology companies will see that as one of their opportunities, not necessarily to provide the utilities and the pipes through which payments flow, but to be information providers, to be trusted keepers of consumers' information, and to put consumers in a position where their financial health and their financial history is a positive part of their relationship with that brand.
Yeah, I did say final question, but let me just come in with a thought or something that Chris Skinner, I don't know whether you've heard of Chris Skinner, in his famous blog, was talking the other day there about the debate within banks about whether it's time to reinvent themselves, whether they need to reincarnate, Doctor Who alike, in order to survive. What do you think?
They're full of smart people, banks, and they have generally survived for many, many decades in most cases, and they've seen competition come from challenger banks, and some of those have been technology-type platforms, and some of them have tried to sell themselves on customer service. I don't think that the age of the banks is over anytime soon, but I think that they will significantly partner with fintechs and use financial technology in order to develop their brand as part of the competition that I was just describing there with the tech companies. Okay,
well, that's been fascinating to look at this through your eyes. So, Charlie Kerrigan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
ICO Radio was brought to you by author, speaker, transparency and clarity advocate and award-winning software innovator Barry James. Get in touch with the programme, put yourself or someone else forward as a guest, visit iconewsdesk.com. And if you've enjoyed the show, please leave a review. And don't forget to subscribe to get your next insights and interviews from the ICO Radio podcast.